Deficit financing is one of the important topics of government budget, and today we'll be focusing on the four most important concept of deficit financing. That is the physical deficit, primary deficit, revenue deficit, and effective revenue deficit. So first starting from the structure of the government budget. So any government budget here has two components. One is its revenue and second one is capital. So in revenue, we have revenue receipts, we have revenue expenditure, and in capital also we have capital receipts and capital expenditure. So now suppose if there is a condition where the revenue receipt, that is the government income, hypothetically I am assuming a number, it's 34. You can assume this as 34 lakh crores and the expenses is 39. And if we look at the capital revenue, it is somewhere around 16 and the capital expenses might be 11. So if we want to count what is the budget deficit, then we will simply uh, see what is the total income minus the total expenditure. So here the total revenue from both the sides is 34 from revenue side and 16 from capital side. So we'll add them. It will come out to be 50. Then we'll see the government expenses. So on the revenue sides, it's 39. On the capital expenditure side, it's 11. So it also amounts to be 50. So if we deduct the total revenue of government minus total expenditure, it will come out to be 0. So our budget deficit will be 0. But there's a clause, there's a catch here. In this capital revenue of 16, we might have borrowings. So assuming that the government borrowed 15 out of this 16 as debt. This is the government borrowing. So basically this is kind of a liability. This the government has to repay. So when we count the fiscal deficit, it is the total expenditure. Fiscal deficit is equals to the total expenditure minus total receipts. And in these receipts, we will exclude this 15 because this ultimately we have to repay. So we'll exclude this borrowing. So now what will be the equation? The equation will be 50 minus this 50 and exclude this borrowing. So from this 50 we'll exclude this. So it will turn out to be 15 and 15 will be minused from 50 and it will turn out to be, sorry, this will be 35 and 50 minus 35 will turn out to be 15 and that will be our fiscal deficit. So this formula of fiscal deficit is equals to total expenditure minus total receipts excluding borrowing. This has been given in most of the standard books. But if you see the Tamil Nadu Board NCRT, there it says fiscal deficit is equals to budget deficit. Budget deficit was 0 plus government borrowings. Government borrowings. So how much was the government borrowing? Government borrowing was 15. So you put 15 here. So budget deficit 0 plus 15. That again turns out to be 15. So the fiscal deficit will remain same, but the methodology of writing it is a bit different. It's just the same thing, but it is framed differently. So this was the concept of fiscal deficit. This definition was according to Tamil Nadu textbook. And if we look at the budget of 2025, so I was telling this number as a hypothetical number, but when you will go in the budget, you will see that fiscal deficit this year was 4.4% of GDP. The data you can see and the data you can see from the budget, and when you'll get these basics clear, you'll have a better understanding of the budget also. Now moving towards next concept, that is primary deficit. Now what is it? Primary deficit, if we go as per the formula, it is fiscal deficit minus interest on earlier loans. So basically this is not complex, but the government makes it complex to hide their things and put the blame on the previous governments. So if you see, when the physical deficit would be high, the government would say, do not focus on the physical deficit. Look at the primary deficit. So what is it? So it says fiscal deficit is, suppose in our example, fiscal deficit was 15. Now of this 15, the government is saying that out of this 15, 12 was the expenditure which was done by earlier governments, earlier regimes. And these were the loans which were taken by the earlier governments, and we have to pay them back. But it's the part which was not being added during their regime, but it was added there during their previous regime. So they'll say we'll minus it. So out of 15, it was 12. So we'll minus it, and then we'll say that our deficit is just 3. So it is kind of cleaning their images. So this is the concept of primary deficit. We will minus the interest on earlier loans from the fiscal deficit, and this will be our primary deficit. Now, what is revenue deficit? So revenue deficit is very simple. Revenue deficit. It is the revenue expenditure minus revenue receipts. So if we see the revenue side of the budget, we have revenue receipts, we have revenue expenditure. So suppose our revenue receipt in our example, what was it? It was 34 and 39. So our revenue receipt, that is our income, was 34. Our expenditure was 39. So we'll just subtract them, 34 from 39. It will turn out to be 5. Suppose this is 5 lakh crores. So this we will say it as our revenue deficit. But now what is effective revenue deficit? Again, for there is no rocket science here. In effective revenue deficit, what we'll simply do is, this was our revenue deficit. So our revenue deficit, we will subtract grants, grants which are used in capital formation. So, capital formation. So, what happens is if there is a government, it has capital expenditure, it does revenue expenditure. Capital expenditure, for example, making schools, making hospitals, and in revenue expenditure, giving salaries to the personnel employed in these schools and hospitals. There is a component of grants given by center to the states. So there is a finance commission and it recommends that certain amount should be given, 41% of this should be given to states in the form of grants. So the union give some amount of money to state in form of grants. Now this grants comes under the revenue expenditure of the government. But when this grant is given to the state, suppose taking an example, the state is further has devoluted this money to the level of panchayat. Now, for example, seeing if the state is working on the disaster management, so it will occupy some workforce which can be used at times of disaster management, and it might also build some shelter homes. It might acquire some vehicles which can be used at times of emergencies. So, though this money, which was written as revenue expenditure and granted to state, now this money is also used as capital expenditure. I mean, we have used this money to create capital. Shelter, home, and vehicle is not our revenue expenditure. It is our capital expenditure. But what has happened is we have mentioned this capital expenditure into our revenue expenditure. So the government says that when such type of expenses are made, which are of capital nature, to find the effective revenue deficit, we must subtract them or we must deduct them from the total revenue deficit. So our what was our total revenue deficit? It was here it was 5. So this from this revenue deficit, we will subtract this money because this is of capital expenditure nature and this will fetch us fruits in future. So whatever the XYZ amount of money which will be spent on making this shelter home and acquiring these vehicles will be deducted from your revenue deficit and this will give us our effective revenue deficit. So the formula in most of the standard books is effective revenue deficit is revenue deficit minus grants. Grants for creation of capital asset. So this revenue in the revenue expenditure grant was given. The state used it to make capital expenditure. So this thing will get minus from the revenue expenditure and whatever the amount we will get is that will be known as our effective revenue deficit.